Agents Podcast.
Evidently, 70% of homeowners have an interest rate under 4%. That creates incredible challenges for not only the real estate industry, the mortgage industry, but pretty much every industry that's trying to sell something to a homeowner to get that homeowner to make a move, which I guess is real estate, Scott. So I figured, you know what, who better to bring on the podcast than the author of a book called Lead Generate. A prominent coach in the industry has changed the lives of many loan officers. It is now changing and shifting into real estate. None other than Scott Groves of Consolidated Coaching. Scott, welcome to the show, my friend. Let's change some lives today, Mike.
Hey, thanks, man, for having me on. And yeah, just to clarify, I think something ridiculous like 40 or 50%, 30, 40, 50% of the houses in America are owned free and clear. So those people probably aren't moving unless there's, the 4 Ds, right? Death, divorce, diapers, or dissolution of a business. I can't remember exactly what they are in real estate parlance. So it's like, keep your ears out for those things, right? And then the remaining people of homeowners who have a mortgage, yeah, something like 65 or 70% of those people have a mortgage sub 4%, sub 5%. Maybe I'm getting the numbers or the percentages a bit wrong, but the point is that I just saw a press release, finally, like Bank of America, big institution, who's finally talking about this. I've been talking about this for like 2 years. I was like, hey guys, we're way underestimating the number of people that are going to be available to sell a house in the next decade, maybe 2 decades, because you got people that just locked in rates during COVID that are lower than inflation, right? Like, depending on what numbers you believe, I have a $500,000 mortgage, $450,000 mortgage on a second home that my wife will not let us sell. And the interest rate is 3%. Inflation, again, depending on who you believe, is somewhere around 4 or 5%. So if I have $500,000 borrowed at 3%, which is tax deductible against my rent, and I have inflation at 4 or 5%, that is the literal definition of printing money. And so, that $700,000 starter home up in Las Vegas, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, nice little cul-de-sac corner lot, like that's the perfect starter house for a young family in Vegas. I wanted to sell it, capture a couple $100,000, put it in my, in my pocket, have some reserves, weather the storm of what I think is going to be a prolonged, slow market. And my wife was like, no way. Like, it was causing one of our very few marital fights where I was like, let's sell and pocket the money. And she was like, no, we're printing money because the interest rate is so low. And if something ever goes horribly wrong, we can rent out or sell the $1 million house that we live in, go live in the $600,000 or $700,000 house that we own. And that mortgage can be paid like driving Uber or flipping burgers because the interest rate is so low. And so that's just one little analogy of something that I think replicates across the market tens of millions of times. And not enough people are talking about this, of like, the deals are just going to be fewer and far between for the foreseeable future. I mean, like decades. I don't care if you're voting for Biden or Trump, they're not going to change it. I don't care what's going on in your local area. It's like too expensive, too costly, and too permit intensive to build a unit of housing everywhere in the country, especially in the area that I service, LA. You're looking at like a year and $60,000 just to permit a piece of land to maybe build something. There's no way you can like build affordable housing under that kind of set of guidelines, right? So it's really hard and expensive to build. Inflation is making things more expensive to build. Most of the property in America is owned free and clear or locked in at a low interest rate. Like, what's the impotence for people to sell their house? I mean, it's really, really tough.
Well, I think we have to know and understand. There's a lot to unpack on what you just said, and and the short time that you said that, there's a lot to unpack. But a lot of those homeowners are probably going to be classified as a baby boomer because they've stayed in place, and many of those homeowners are going to die, are going to go to a home. That's just the reality. And so what kind of opportunity does that present? And then, as you mentioned, doesn't matter who you're voting for, and we're not sure, because at the time of this recording, this is the day after the infamous debate where I will leave my opinions aside, but we're not really sure who's going to be running for the Democratic Party. Let's just say that, right? And I think you all know what I mean. And so there's a lot of variables in place here because you've got a generation of people that are going to either be moving on, whether that's into another place or to an afterlife, right? And then you've got a presidential election coming up. And so, Scott, I mean, historically, that's an opportunity to capitalize. There's opportunity. What do you anticipate and where should we go?
Yeah, there's some interesting things that I think about of like, if you look back at all the recessions, let's call it modern economic theory, right? Like post Great Depression. So we're coming up on almost 100 years of past data. And much like your credit score, I can't guarantee that if you've always paid your bills, you're going to continue to pay your bills. But the credit scoring system exists because past performance is a pretty good indicator of future results, right? So this time could be different, right? Every time could be different. Technology is changing. We're getting into the world of AI, and there could be some really disruptive technologies. But one of the things we know for sure is that historically looking, the average recession has lasted a little over a year. But you can't really call a recession until you're like 2 quarters into an economic downturn, because a recession is defined by like 2 quarters of downward or negative GDP, right? And so you start to think about like, well, before we even know we're in a problem, we're halfway out of the problem. The thing that I'm a little bit worried about this is that like, if we have this prolonged, I don't know, inflation, recession, stagflation, whatever terminology economists are going to use, it just feels like, even though we should be kind of getting out of the woods of like the bust cycle, which has been kind of 2 years of, yeah, the stock market's still going up, but inflation is kicking people in the teeth. There's not a lot of business out there if you're in the real estate or mortgage world. Feels like we should probably be halfway through that. Because of this lock-in effect, we kind of don't really know. Like things might go sideways and property values will still stay strong because there's lack of inventory. And so one of the things I've been talking to the realtors that I either coach formally or I try to coach because I'm doing business with them as a loan officer is like, no offense, but you got to shut your mouth. You can't let the negativity of lack of deals, which we're all dealing with, right? Like I was used to closing 10 to 15 deals a month. During COVID, when everybody was refinancing, there were months where we're closing 25, 30 deals a month. Working just as hard, if not harder, we're lucky to close like 3 or 4 deals a month to keep the bills paid and the lights on. But that doesn't mean the market is bad. Yeah, we've seen a few areas like Austin and Miami where there was such run up during COVID. We're seeing a 3 or 4% correction, but it's nothing like 2008 where, hey, 6 months from now, I'm going to get a house 30% cheaper. No, that's not going to happen because of simple supply and demand. And so when I'm coaching the realtors that I'm talking about is like, hey, you have to find a way to bring some positivity and gratitude to the conversation with your clients, because meaning us as a real estate and mortgage industry, our negativity over lack of transaction, which is really affecting our bottom line financially, does not mean that the market is bad. And so as professionals who pick this industry of real estate, we have to be used to these boom and bust cycles. But what's interesting is it's a bust to our paycheck right now. It is not a bust to the market. And we have to make sure we're holding those buckets separate, because if not, our negativity can bleed through to our clients. And then guess what? The few precious deals that we do have, they're not going to want to work with us, because who wants to work with a negative Nelly, right? So it sounds weird to kind of fake it till you make it, or it's going to be okay. This too shall pass. But that's kind of the mentality you got to have of like, smile and nod. Everything's going to be okay. Instill confidence in your client because the market is good. It is still a good time to buy a house. It's just a shitty time to be a realtor or a lender. I mean, that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. And well, so when you say it's a shitty time to be a real estate agent, I know what that means. And I think everybody probably has a different perception or lens on how they interpret that. And it could be high rates, it could be low inventory, it could be overinflated values, it could be just an overall lack of business. You've got generations not buying. How do you identify or narrow that explanation down?
Yeah. I think I narrowed down is just lack of willing buyers and sellers. Like when I say it's a shitty market, I mean it's a shitty market because there is a lack of willing sellers and buyers. And so what we're seeing on the mortgage front is I think I mentioned this time that we spoke before for this group, is in a normalized market. I can look into my CRM, see all the numbers, and I'm kind of a data geek. We've got right around $85 million of fully locked and loaded pre-approvals. These are people that have been through the paces. We did the consult, we did the follow-up, they sent in their paperwork, we got them pre-approved, it went through underwriting. Like, they can go under contract tomorrow. And with an $80 to $90 million pre-approved pipeline in a normalized market, not COVID where rates were super low, or not now where rates are higher and property affordability is rough and inflation is kicking people in the teeth. In a normalized market, let's call it 2010 to 2020. So for a decade. And then before that, 2000 to 2005, because you and I have been around that long. So say 15 out of the last 24 years, an $80 to $90 million pipeline of pre-approved buyers, I'd be having about 10 or 12 million worth of deals going under contract every month. There would be some fallout. There'd be some cold feet. There'd be some rate shopping. There'd be some shenanigans. Maybe we close 8, 9, or 10 million a month. Right now, what we're closing is like 2 to 4 million a month, depending on the loan size, right? So when I say it's a shatty market for us people in real estate and mortgage, it's just the ability to bring together willing buyers and willing sellers. And then a lot of times what that means is that on the other side of the equation, the deals we can put together, there is an unwilling seller or buyer, right? Meaning the buyer has to buy because they are truly sized out of their home. They don't want to spend an extra $2,000 a month on their mortgage, but they need the extra bedroom for the kid. Or they took a remote job where they're working from home and they're like, I can't do it from the kitchen counter anymore. We have to buy a bigger house with a home office. And so even when we have deals put together, there might be a somewhat unwilling or uncomfortable buyer, or we might have that seller. I mentioned the 4Ds, and some other real estate coach is going to correct me on this, but the diapers, the divorce, the death of a primary wage earner or a family member and having to downsize, or the dissolution of a business where you just can't afford your house anymore. Those people that just went through death or divorce, or the stress of having new family members that are in diapers, or old family members that are in diapers, or they can't afford the mortgage anymore. Those people aren't particularly willing sellers either. They're doing it out of a financial necessity. So it's not only that there's fewer willing parties coming together to create deals in the marketplace, the people that are creating deals, it's more stressful than ever, right? Yeah. And so this is just kind of the landscape that we have to navigate as realtors and mortgage professionals.
So let's hit it head on. We are talking in late June. This will definitely come out midsummer, if not earlier. So you've got loan officers and real estate agents vacating the industry. You've got, as I mentioned in the beginning, an impending election that is a shit show. And so as someone who coaches salespeople, what should we do at this point? Where should we go?
Yeah, there's kind of 3 books that I've been recommending a lot. Shameless self-promotion. One of them is mine. But one of the books is Shift by Gary Keller. Feels a little dated because it was written 20 years ago. But the concepts in the book of like, hey, in lean times, we've got to get super lean, right? The convenience of having an executive assistant for the last 10 years, that might not be the case, right? Might be time to talk to your 17-year-old kid or your spouse and be like, hey, where can you fill in some gaps here, right? Yeah. So I think getting lean, figuring out what the return on investment of everything we're spending money on, that whole thing that realtors and loan officers get pitched on of like, well, yeah, this product is $300 a month, but if you just close one deal a month, or sorry, if you just close one deal a year, it pays for itself, right? Yeah. We've all signed up for something at a conference where like just one extra deal a year is going to pay for this software or this system or this program or this coaching. And then all of a sudden you're up to like 5 or 6 things that you need to close a deal a year for in order to pay for them. There's not that many deals to go around. Yeah, so getting lean and figuring out what you're really spending your money on, that book Shift will do that. And then
by the way, where was that book in order from Jab, Jab, Hook?
So Gary Keller,
Gary Keller, not Gary V.
Yeah, Gary Keller. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. He wrote it right after he wrote Millionaire Real Estate Agent, because he wrote Millionaire Real Estate Agent. I happen to have spent some time with Jay Papasan, his ghostwriter, who's the really the brains behind all of Gary Keller's books. They wrote Millionaire Real Estate Agent, in the late 80s, I think.
It's a good book. That's a good book.
All these real estate agents built like a mega team, and then they got hit with a bad economy. And he's like, oh God, everybody just took on all this staff and expense and whatnot. Now I got to write the follow-up book on like how to get lean and focus on the activities that really matter. So Gary Keller writing Shift, great book for you can read it in one sitting. It's pretty easy, and just really tighten the belt, right? Maybe my wife's buying meat at Costco now instead of Butcher Box or whatever. And I really miss that really good salmon from Butcher Box, but now I'm eating the pink crap from Costco. Anyway, I digress. Number 2, some type of book on lead generation, whether it's my book, Lead Generate 61 Days to Double Your Pay. Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt is an amazing book. Like, you've just got to recommit to the process of lead generating and building relationships. And when I mean lead generating, I don't mean calling back the online Zillow lead who's never going to buy a house, calling that person 30 times. That's not what I mean by lead generation. When I mean lead generation, I mean going back to past clients, sphere of influence, building a deeper and deeper relationship with anybody in your circle or in your pipeline or in your CRM. Because the reality is, when we talk about those 4Ds, the death diapers, et cetera, you have to have a pretty deep relationship with somebody for them to come to you and be like, hey, Jeff, reality check time. Like, I think I got to sell my lake house because I can't afford the payments anymore on the second home. Things are lean. I own a plaster business, and new construction is down and cost of materials are up. Like, it takes a real vulnerable moment for somebody to talk to you about selling their house because of a reason that they don't really want to sell their house. Right. And so going deeper with those people during your lead generation and just building deeper connections, I think that's number 2. And then number 3, book that I've been referring to all my agents is The Full Fee Agent, written by Chris Voss, FBI negotiator, who wrote Never Split the Difference, and Steve Scholl, who's a personal friend of mine, and he was actually my coach for a while. Steve Scholl, he's out of Los Angeles, California. He's probably coached 200 or 300 of the top producing realtors in the entire country. And for $15 from this book, you get a lifetime of knowledge from Chris Voss, FBI negotiator, plus Steve Scholl, one of the greatest real estate coaches in America of all time. And it talks about, okay, now that you've tightened your belt, you're lead generating, now you have somebody to talk to. How do I actually talk to them to make sure I get paid, right? Because there is a lot of agents right now and a lot of realtors and a lot of loan officers who, quite frankly, are working for free. They don't know it yet, but the amount of time and money they're putting in, and their infrastructure and their hard costs and their per deal costs, there's a lot of loan officers and realtors that are trying to just take any deal by cutting commission or cutting rates or cutting comp. They're going to get to the end of the year and realize oh, I didn't make any money. I made 150 grand. That's what's on my 1099 or my W-2, but my credit card balance went up 30 grand. I owe 30 grand in taxes. Here's my overhead. I should have just went and got a real job, quote unquote, making $30 an hour. So those 3 books, right? Like Shift to Tighten Your Belt, something on prospecting, Lead Generate 61 Days to Double Your Pay, or Fanatical Prospecting, and then The Full Fee Agent. That will save your career right now if you dig into those 3 books and execute.
Okay. So I'm going to challenge you, because I think that although someone could read a book, will that correlate or quantify into revenue, into dollars, into growth, right? And so you've probably consumed these books. And so now I want to know. And so let's talk to a different skill levels, different experience levels. And let's start with the most common that I would say. I'm going to guess here, because I don't know this. I don't have any data to back this up. But I'm going to say let's go like the 5-year to 15-year agent, loan officer, who's experienced a lot of success.
Yeah.
Whether they were 15 years in or they were brand new in 2020, 2021, they experienced success unlike they've ever seen in their life, right? And now they've experienced
Pain.
maybe failure. Yeah, is unlike they've ever seen. So it's like the extent of both worlds. So if you're talking to that agent, so they've got a solid book of business built up. They've got a solid base of past customers. They understand the business. Where do you advise somebody like that? What do you advise them to do?
So there's this famous study where this guy, I can't remember if it's a guy or a gal, they were like a relationship therapist, and they claimed that they could predict a divorce with like 80% accuracy
Oof.
within hearing 1 minute of a conversation between a husband and wife.
Oh, wow.
And their claim was like, I can be sitting at a restaurant, overhear a conversation at a dinner table, and if there's resentment or disdain or passive aggressiveness that comes out in the conversation, that marriage is doomed. Like with 80% accuracy, right?
Really?
I wish we need like a Jamie from the Joe Rogan show who can bring up this study, because it's fascinating. And he had like, disdain, passive aggressiveness, like resentment, a blameful attitude, like these things. He's like, I'm the worst therapist in the world, because if they come to the first therapy session and they have that, he's like, hey, we've got 1 week to fix this, or there's nothing I can do. You're going to end up divorced anyway, right? And so here's the conversation I'm having with people. And I suspect that with about 80 or 90% accuracy, how people respond to this conversation is whether or not they'll be in the industry in a year or 2 or 5. And I'm talking about the people that are like the primary breadwinner for their family. They really need to make the money. Like if you're doing this part-time because your spouse makes a ton of money, awesome. God bless you. You're in a great place to weather the storm. But if you're the primary breadwinner for you and or your family, here's the difference. And here's what I'm asking people, Jeff. I've talked to a lot of realtors, people that I've worked with that, used to be good for 4 or 5 deals a year, which really means they're, closing 10 or 12 deals a year in Vegas or LA. That's enough closings to like keep your pockets full, right? And your belly full. I'm talking to them and I hear this all the time. And they say, well, Scott, I'm just not motivated to do the thing anymore. Whatever their thing was, calling back internet leads or door knocking or working their sphere or driving around to every open house or holding an open house every single weekend, no matter where or how they could. They'd be the person in the office who something's been on the market 9 months. Everybody knows it's overpriced. They're like, cool, I'll work it. I might pick up a buyer, right? So when I'm talking to realtors or loan officers who are like, I'm just not motivated to do it anymore. I have a foul mouth. I cuss. I joke a lot. I just immediately hit them in the gut with like, no shit. You're not motivated to do that? It's currently 111 degrees in Vegas. You mean you're not motivated to go door knock, track housing to try to find a $400,000 listing in 111 degree heat? No kidding. Nobody's motivated to that. Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Lender, you're no longer motivated to talk to clients who are like, I'll just go ahead and say illegally writing everything off on their tax returns. They show no income because they own their own business. And then they're mad at you that they can't get the best loan with the best rate with the best terms. No shit, you're not motivated to do that anymore. But are you committed to doing it? And maybe you're committed to doing it because that's your only choice. You don't know any other industry and you've got to make enough money to pay your mortgage. Or maybe you're committed to it because you believe if you weather this storm, there are truly greener pastures on the other side where half of the lenders, actually 2/3 of the lenders and half the realtors in the world don't renew their license. And so when there is an uptick, you'll get an unfair, like lion's share of those transactions. For whatever reason, if you're committed and not like using this word motivated, which is my most hated word in the world, then you can make it, right? And if I see the head nodding and they start saying, yeah, that's right, man, I do need to be committed. Like this is a job, just like anything else. If I see them kind of in tune with this idea of like, yeah, I got to get back to my commitments. I got to get back to doing the things I said I was going to do. I got to get back to the things I did in the first year of my business to grow my business. If they're nodding along with the word commitment, they're going to find a way to make it. if they're just like, nah, I don't know, man, buyers are liars and it's hard out there and Rocket Mortgage has a better rate. I just don't know if I'm motivated to do this anymore. I'm like, you're not worth my time. You're not going to be in the business. I don't want your money for coaching because you're going to fail anyway and then you're going to blame it on me. So it's like that little conversation of, are you motivated or are you committed? To me, I think that is the defining moment in our business right now of like, which one are you? Because ain't nobody motivated to do this job right now. It is super duper hard. But if you're committed, you can still make a great living doing it. And, I got a loan officer in our coaching program who's already funded $50 million year to date, right? That's $500,000 as of June 28th that she's made in probably the worst mortgage market we've seen in my lifetime, right? I know realtors that still have 8 listings right now that are really well priced. They're going to move. They're going to get their, net 2% commission from their brokerage, and they're going to make 100 grand in the next 45 days. Like, the business is out there. It's just a matter of, are you committed and can you build the relationships deep enough to capture that business when somebody actually does have to sell or buy?
There's so many questions I have, and I want to stay down a path because I don't want to digress too far. So we just were talking about, and I challenged you with the 5 to 15 year range, and we kind of talked about the challenges that are being presented or that we're facing in this industry. And there's 2 other segments of that I would argue professionals, again, real estate or mortgage. That is the newbie, less
Yep.
than 5 years in the business, and then the veteran. And so you've got, and I'll guide you here. The newbie, no experience, no book of business, but probably a little bit of a technical advantage, right? They understand social. They understand how to connect with the younger homeowner, but they have a challenge of experience, a lack of. They have a challenge of looking young, therefore lack of experience with the older seller buyer, right? So let's start there. Let's start with the newbie who has an advantage when it comes to maybe the new innovative ways of marketing, but a disadvantage with a lack of experience and just looking young in an industry that has an average age of 50 something.
Yeah.
What are
So
you advising to that person?
So yeah, the newbie, again, these stats might be a little bit off, but they're close enough for government work. 70% of new buyers in the next 5 years are going to be millennials or, Gen Z, right? So millennials, Gen Z are going to be 70% of the buyers who buy over the next 5 years. 70% of those people find their realtor on social media. So I'm not a mathematician, but I think 70% of 70% is about 50%. So about 50% of all of the buyers, a couple million people a year, are going to find their realtor on social media, right? And I'm even getting to the point where I'm a little too old and a little long in the tooth and chubby in the jaw to attract like the super young hipster 25-year-old on social media looking for a cool realtor, right? Or a cool lender. And so to the younger people, I would say, just go with what you know, which is social media, online marketing, sliding into people's DMs to talk to them about business, keep it professional. And just go with what you know, because for the first time in human history, that's also the buying demographic, right? It was all cute when TikTok was a bunch of 12 to 15-year-olds, but it's like, okay, TikTok's cute, but who gives a shit? Because 12 to 15-year-olds aren't buying houses, they aren't buying cars, they aren't buying designer bags. The big industry, housing, tech, wasn't paying attention to TikTok because 12 to 15-year-olds don't have buying power. Well, now those 12 to 15-year-olds, 10 years later, they were on Musical.ly. Now they're on TikTok. Now they're 25 with, a programming job making 120 grand a year, and they're getting ready to buy their first house. So I would say for the younger people, don't be intimidated, because you can lean into the thing that you know and generate leads that way. And then here's the thing. Half of something is better than all of nothing. So if you are a younger agent, and because of your social media presence or just your hustle, because you're willing to go out there, if you get to a point where you're intimidated, every real estate agent works for a broker, right? Like if somebody came to you, Jeff, and they're like, hey, Jeff, I got this lead, but it's lakefront on the Ozarks. It's the highest priced property in the county. It's probably going to go for 3 million. There's no comps. I don't know what staging or a marketing plan looks like on a $3 million house on the Lake of the Ozarks. Will you partner with this partner with me on this and go 50-50? Because if you're feeling intimidated walking into that listing appointment, you're going to come across as if you're intimidated. You're not going to instill confidence. You're going to lose the deal, right? So if you're younger, I would say find a senior agent, somebody like myself or Jeff that has a little bit more white hair and gray beard, and just be like, hey, man, I'd rather have half this commission than none of this commission, or 70-30 or 60-40 or 90-10 or whatever you negotiate. Can you help usher me along so I can have some borrowed confidence from this like elder statesman and just bring you into the deal? Right. And I know a lot of brokerages have this set up intrinsically where like the training partner or whatever is part of the first 3, 4, 5 deals. I think Keller Williams still does that. I think Remax does that. But, don't be shameful if you're a younger agent to lead generate your ass off on social media. And then if you get one on the line, right, if you get a big Marlin on the line, don't be scared to turn to the captain and be like, hey, man, help me reel this in. Like, there's no shame in that. I refer out deals all the time because like, I'm not the expert. I just did this the other day. Somebody wanted to buy 100-acre hobby farm in like Temecula that has like a winery on it and all kinds of crazy stuff. And I'm like, dude, I'm not the USDA expert. I don't know what the pitfalls of having a farm hobby horse vineyard thing is. Just refer that to somebody that knows the deal. And, he's going to sign up for coaching and pay me some money. So that's not a bad swap. So the younger people shouldn't be intimidated. Go with what you know, and then bring in a senior partner. Like if you do start to get intimidated.
I like that. The only thing that you were off on is the price point of lakefront property at the Lake of the Ozarks. 3 million is becoming like very mid-range at this point. A nice home can go upwards of 5. And I mean, the most expensive home ever listed here was 15 million this summer, actually.
Cow.
Yeah, that's a lot of coastal money is moving into the Midwest, and so and that's not to say that you can't. In fact, I just did a video yesterday of a condo, and we don't want to get off tangent here, but of a 3-bedroom condo that's for 350,000. Like that's normal. It's a very nice condo, 40-foot boat slip, nice stuff. But yeah, the price points are going up exponentially, which goes back to probably the biggest struggle that a young professional might have is that, well, maybe I don't feel like I'm experienced enough to do that. And I think that's great advice that you gave them, because lean into what you know, because your peers don't have that expertise, and then just lean into the person who wants to help support you and mentor you, which leads us to that person, which is 15 plus years in the industry. And I think we're getting to a point where, and it's interesting because I just saw a thread the other day, and I'm so badly want to snip pictures of it and reply to it. And somebody who has fair amount of influence, experience in the industry, and the gist of the post, which was very long, he commented on his own post, how that kind of thing is with threads, right? And the gist of it was taking a shot at saying influencers are ruining the industry, and we should get back to experience and know-how and understanding real estate, which he or she, I'm not even really sure, I think it's a he, is not necessarily wrong.
Right.
But just like my grandfather said 25, 30 years ago, I'm never going to use that stupid thing. And he was talking about a computer, which we now walk around with in our pockets. He's not wrong. Like, I wish we could, just like, it's like, let's go back to the days when we rode horses, then we wouldn't have car accidents, right? I mean, it would fix everything, but it's not happening. And so it's like, I so badly want to reply to this guy or create content that says, listen, the evolution of time is a guarantee. It's not going to change. And so you can be pissed off and bitch about, and by the way, there was a lot of feedback comments that was like, yes, say it again, which is a testament to me of that the industry, humans don't like change. We don't like to evolve. I don't give a shit if you dislike it or like it. We are getting to a place in our world, and you mentioned it, 70% of the upcoming home buyers are going to be young people, like 35 and under. They
Yep.
find the products and services that they will buy with through social. You either embrace it and adapt, or you're kind of screwed. And so let's talk to that old school agent or loan officer and
Go
give
fired
them
up,
some
bro.
advice. Let's go.
Okay, can I be a little crude to this person who made
Please,
this post?
please, please.
This is the first question I would ask this person who made the post. I would say, hey, two things can be true at the same time. It's absolutely a yes and. You know, it pains me that Rocket Mortgage has a $700 million a year budget to convince consumers, hey, click a button, get a mortgage, go with us, we're the lowest rate. Because anybody that has been in the business for 2 minutes knows there's so much stuff that goes into building a mortgage. I want clients to realize I don't start my search for a home with a realtor because they're going to show me a house I have no idea if I can afford, or I'm going to walk into an open house I have no idea I can afford. My search for a home should actually start with a lender. The lender should like hold all the keys to the kingdom and refer the client over to the realtor, and the realtor should be kissing my ass to get leads, not the other way around, because that would make the most financial sense. That's not the way the market is, right? And so two things can be true at the same time. I absolutely agree with him that like, I wish we could somehow put the toothpaste back in the tube and there be like a race to professionalism instead of a race to the bottom. But that's not the reality we live in. The reality we live in is like technology marches on. But the real question I would ask that guy, I would say, okay, let's say your thesis is correct. Let me ask you, Mr. Realtor, we'll call him Realtor Tom. Hey, Tom, when is the last time you called every single one of the clients in your database and you just said, hey, Jeff, I know you're super happy. You got your forever house, you got your lake house, but hey, I know your kids are getting to the age of where they're going to buy a house. And I know your kids trust your input, Jeff. And I know your kids are probably going to get probably some of their down payment from gift funds from mom and dad. When it's time for your kids to buy a house, don't let them go with some realtor they found in TikTok. Make sure they come back to me. I'll take care of your kids just the way I took care of you. I'll keep you involved in the transaction so you have some input because you're going to be putting up some of the money anyway. And like, when could we do a buyer's consult with you and your kids? If that realtor hasn't made those phone calls, fuck him. He's just complaining. He's not actually a professional who wants to be a professional. He's just a whiny bitch complaining about losing deals on social media. Because the reality is, if you wanted to be treated like a professional, you have to act like a professional, which means you're doing annual check-ins with your clients on the anniversary of when they bought the property. You're checking in with them to see if there's divorce or diapers or degrees. We're going to add a fifth D, degrees. If you're not talking to your clients about when their kids are getting their degrees, then you're losing out because those kids are going to buy a home, and you should get that deal if you're the trusted real estate professional in the family. So it's a yes and. Two things can be true. On one hand, I totally agree with him. On the other hand, I suspect he's probably just bitching and he's not doing the things in his own business that he should be doing to add value as the professional, so that that client forces their Gen Z and Gen G and Gen X and
Alpha.
Yeah, alpha's coming along.
Yeah,
like, if you're not talking to these parents to influence the kids, then shame on you. You're losing out. So the 25-year-old TikTok celebrity that doesn't know what I don't know, a septic tank is, that guy should get the deal because they're outworking you. That's my rant. Sorry.
No, but that's, if somebody's offended by that, you are part of your own problem. Like,
right.
that's the thing that you have to recognize, because what you just did was find a solution for somebody who may not have the quote unquote influence. But the reality is, and you know this because you and I talk about a lot of things behind the scenes. And by the way, I'm on the innovative fence, and Scott's on the traditional fence, but yet we've come together because it's a recognition of, hey, you need both. And when I teach social, it's like, hey, social is not going to fix the world's problems. It's going to enhance what you've been doing traditionally.
Totally.
You say it's like, hey, you got to keep doing the traditional things, but if you don't start implementing the innovative things, you're going to be screwed. Because there's like, honestly, I think we're going through a shift over the next, and I'd guess 5 years ish of transition, where the agent who dominates the traditional prospecting and integrates some social is going to have a lot of success.
100%.
The agent or LO who is on the highly innovative side but implements some traditional is going to have a shit ton of success. But we all are evolving into highly technical, innovative style of marketing because that's just where the world's going. And by 2030, what do they say? Like, most baby boomers will be gone out of their houses or gone from this earth. What does that create? And so it's like, you can sit there and bitch about it and you can complain about it and say, we got to get back to the basics, blah, blah, blah. I think, Scott, we're in 2024, over the next 5.5 years, you got to have a really good mix. And then come 2030, I think our conversation is completely different than it is right now.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. And I think, if nothing else, it's brand recognition, right? I remember I was really into marketing at a young age. I had a 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Rosori. I'll never forget her. And she had come from a marketing, like big time marketing firm, made buku bucks by the time she was 40, basically had FU retirement money. And was like, I want to go teach public school because I want to give back, right? And so she would do all these cool marketing exercises for us. And I remember after the Super Bowl, I don't know who played because it was, I don't know, I was in 6th grade. So what would that be, like 1990? So
that might have been when Michael Jackson was doing the halftime show. Maybe
it was probably the Dallas Cowboys, I'm guessing. I asked her, I was like, why does Coca-Cola need to advertise at the Super Bowl? I didn't my dad at halftime didn't go out and get a 12-pack of Coca-Cola because he saw the Coca-Cola commercial, or back then it was probably Pepsi, right? Like Michael Jackson had a joint venture with Pepsi. So she's like, no, what you don't understand is it's like planting a seed for brand awareness. So when you walk down the aisle and you see Squirt, because Squirt was big back then, you see Squirt and you see Coke, you reach for the Coke. It's just brand awareness. And so for that old school agent who's like, you know what, Scott? F you back. I am doing the annual calls. I am doing the check-ins. I am doing the annual gifts. I am doing the client appreciation parties. I am checking in with them quarterly or whatnot. I'm doing the whole 35 touch system in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent, which, side note, the number of real estate agents who have never read the book, The Millionaire Real Estate Agent, crazy, blows my mind, but whatever. The people that are actually doing that.
Can we stop right there for a second and just say that Keller Williams or not, it's one of the OG, iconic, greatest books every real estate agent should read.
Yeah.
We agree with that.
I know people that don't read it because they're like, well, I'm never going to work at Keller Williams. Cool. So how about you do the best of both worlds? You steal their whole playbook without ever having to work there for $15.
Yeah.
Like no brainer. So,
Carry on.
So for the older agent, if nothing else, like, use social media as some brand awareness, right? Because, we talked about the 70% of 70%. Most of them are going to find their realtor online, and they're going to be Gen Z and Gen Y and millennials and what have you. Gen Y, millennials, now Gen Alpha, right?
Yeah, the Alpha is the one under Gen Z. Yes.
Okay. So even though that's true, 30% of the deals, which let's say are found the old school way by older people, 30% of 4 million deals is still 1.2 million deals. You don't need a whole lot of those to have a great career as a realtor, right? So if you can at least get some brand recognition out there so that when you do connect with those $1.2 million old school buyers, they at least know your face. They know your name. They've seen you around, they have some affinity for you. So I think it all works in tandem. That's why you and I are doing the partnership together that we're doing, because it's a yes and. Yes, you got to be on social media. And yes, after you talk to that person on social media, you have to pick up the phone and prospect them for a deal.
I think that's probably the best takeaway from this podcast. Yes, and. Yes, and. So whether you are a newbie, whether you are in the middle, whether you are a seasoned agent, I guess the conversation is, are you an agent? Are you in the industry, real estate industry, mortgage, title, real estate, and you intend on being here for the next 5 years? That's who we're talking to. If you're the agent that doesn't plan on being here 15 years from now, that's not what we're talking to. 5 years from now, the next 5 years are going to be such a transitional period in all industries that yes, and. So What would be your parting thoughts on that yes and conversation?
Yeah, my parting thoughts are like, you have to know what works for you, right? So it's like one of my favorite places because nostalgically, I went there for, summer camp every year as a child is Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, about an hour and a half, 2 hours outside of Los Angeles. If I won the lotto tomorrow, I would buy a lakefront property on Lake Arrowhead because I just have like such a pull to that area. But selling stuff on Lake Arrowhead is way different than selling stuff on Lake of the Ozarks, right? So again, back to this yes and stuff. Take the coaching input, listen to the podcast, read the books, listen to your, coworkers, your peers, your sibling rivalries, your management team, whatever. And yes, and right, ingest all that information and figure out what works for you. I've got a buddy who has a thriving speaking business, like $20,000 a keynote, and he's booked solid. He does not do any video content because that's just not his zone of genius. But this, which is weird because he's up on stage all the time, but like video and social media, he just doesn't feel connected. He loves the energy he gets from the audience. He can't just talk to a camera with the same authenticity that he can talk to a crowd for keynotes. But this dude's written word is absolutely beautiful. He'll do a 70 paragraph Facebook post, and I just can't wait to get to it to read it. Like I will bookmark his posts to read them later because that's what works for him, right? Yeah. So yes, and consume all the stuff you need for ideas, but eventually you got to figure out what works for you. And my favorite word, commitment. What can you stay committed to? And then find your path to build your business, right? Because loan officer, title officer, realtor, there's a million ways to skin that cat. You just got to find the skinning method that like you'll stay committed to.
I love it. I love it, dude. What is the best way for our listener to connect with you if they want to do so?
It's so embarrassing to say this out loud because I never thought I would be this guy, but Instagram. So Scott L is in lover or loser, depending on how you felt about this podcast. Scott L Groves, Groves, like a grove of trees, but with an S on the end. Scott L Groves on Instagram. That's me. That's where I put up most of my content. If you follow me there, you're going to see a lot of jiu-jitsu stuff. You're going to see a lot of kids stuff. But
authentic.
I do put in some mortgage and coaching and some real estate stuff. So
why is that embarrassing, Scott?
Because to me, I'm still stuck in my 20-year-old mindset where like Instagram is for girls who like to post pictures of flowers and desserts and cute cocktails.
That's like 15 years ago.
I know, like what Instagram used to be is what I think of it in my mind. Like I'm still in this mental mindset every time I go to Instagram where I'm like, I'm not a 22-year-old college co-ed who needs to post a picture of my butterscotch cake. Like to me, that's what Instagram is and always will be. But thanks to you, Jeff, quite frankly, I've adjusted and adapted and overcome.
I love it. I love it. I think the best way, so first of all, make sure you connect with Scott on Instagram, Scott L as in lover, Groves. Make sure that you connect. And, again, it's yes and. It's yes and. If you find yourself in that same mindset of just being hateful about evolution and about change, you're probably going to be left behind. And there, again, you don't have to be the best at the next thing, but you've got to be willing to embrace it. And Scott, I'm looking forward to all the things that we're doing together. I look forward to continuing to follow you. And speaking of, when you talk about moving to Bear Lake or whatever, I've watched you start to get super integrated into the engagement in Lake of the Ozarks lifestyle, which tells me this is your people down here. You are. I know this. I felt it when I was watching you engaging.
Yeah, I might end up at Lake of the Ozarks. Okay. I won't say no. Let's put it that way.
I love it, dude. I appreciate you, man.
All right. Talk to you soon, brother.
Take care.
Lab Coat Agents Podcast.